There was a time when the name Nikon was reserved only for the top of the line professional models. If you had no reason to have one, or you couldn't afford a proper Nikon, you would have got a Nikkormat. This is the Nikkormat FT2, and it was made between 1975 and 1977. So this camera predates the Nikon FM, and it has considerable differences. It's a little bit bigger than the FM, but the main difference is the layout of controls. It's as if Nikon had hijacked or kidnapped an engineer from Olympus and forced them to make a Nikon that looked like an overgrown Olympus camera. So a little walk around the camera. The lenses for this camera predate the AI auto indexing system that Nikon produced for the FM. So this little spur here connects with the bunny ears on the lens, so to tell the camera the aperture of the lens. I'll come back to that one because it's quite interesting. And here we have a mirror lockup. Here we have the lens release button. A little bit of that has disappeared. This lever here controls the shutter speed. The ASA dial is on the bottom of the camera. This is incredibly fiddly. To alter this, you have to pull this leader out, then move this bracket round to change the ISO, well, ASA in its day. We have a self-timer here. The self-timer doesn't act as a depth of field preview as it does on some cameras. That is somewhere else. The top of the camera, let's turn it around this way. We have a normal looking lever wind to advance the film. We have the shutter release. We have a very clear frame counter. This is our depth of field preview. Here is our rewind button, and on the end of the camera we have the socket for the flash gun. The thing that I've missed is it has a window here which gives you an indication of the exposure. So the meter is linked internally and on here. Personally, I find that very, very useful. As I use a tripod a lot of the time, the fact that I can see what the exposure is going to be without actually squinting through the viewfinder is very useful to me, but clearly it's a personal thing. The hot shoe, as you can see, only has a center contact, so it's very primitive. The bottom of the camera has the button to release the clutch inside the winder, so you can rewind the camera, and we have the battery cover here. This battery cover doesn't unscrew fully, it's about a quarter of a turn and it just pops off. And here of course we have the basic 1/4 inch tripod mount. To open the camera up, it's simply pull down this lever and open the back. Vertical blades, shutter, film goes in here, feeds across here, slots in the slot here. No surprises, perfectly straightforward, very traditional very solid. The lens on this particular camera is the Nikkormat 50mm f1.2. Standard F mount, but here you can see the bunny ears that I referred to earlier. When you mount the lens on the camera, you have to make sure that the prong that's sticking out the camera body engages with these bunny ears. Apart from the fact it might cause damage, otherwise it's just not going to work. Mounting the lens requires turning the shutter speed dial further than it wants to go. When you put back the lens onto the camera, then you have to first of all click it into place, then you have to effectively train the lens. You have to tell it by moving it backwards and forwards what the minimum and maximum aperture of the lens are. Perhaps you can see here though that here we have our shutter speeds. Now clearly this is very difficult to see if you were operating the camera normally rather than holding it at this strange angle, but they're not really meant to be seen that way. There's a small window underneath the O in Nikkormat which shows the shutter speeds in your viewfinder. So overall, a little bit of a tank of a camera. It is very heavy, it's very solidly built. These days you can pick these up for about £90 body only, and perhaps another £30 or £40 for this lens. If you want to get into film photography, particularly landscape photography, where you can take the advantage of the meter mirror here, then this is an excellent entry into the field of Nikon cameras. I still find it strange that Nikon didn't consider this to be a proper Nikon. This was a marketing error, I think, on their part, one they rectified all too much when they introduced a series of Nikon cameras which weren't nearly as good as this, most noticeably the Nikon EM. But I think this is quite a beautiful little camera. Someone's lent this to me, so it's not mine, but I kind of wish it was. So the Nikkormat FT2 35mm single lens reflex camera.